Welcome to Shotgun, a brand new podcast from East Coast Car Rentals where every road trip has its own unique story. Joining us today for episode 3 of the podcast is Jason Hoffman, Newcastle Jets veteran and head of commercial. Welcome, Jason.
Thanks so much, Ben. Thanks for having me on. Glad to be on the podcast.
So what's been going on? Lots of big things happening at the Jets lately.
Sure is. There's a lot of exciting movement at our football club at the moment and within our football community. So I guess, where to start? So for me, obviously, it's a good time to be working at the football club. Obviously, being a player here, growing up in the area, being connected to the Newcastle Jets, probably like a fan would be connected, and then having really a dream career playing here and then moving into the role I am now. I get to see a lot of the inner workings of a football club and have a new appreciation for our staff of what they would go through to make sure match day went ahead for us as players. But really the big changes at the moment for us, and it's an exciting time to be a part of what we're doing, is there's new people, obviously a new culture being instilled in the football club, and that starts really at the top with our board. So independent ownership roughly 18 months ago certainly was the major catalyst for some positive movement and growth at the football club, and then that's trickled into this A-League season that's just begun, where we have new A-League men's and new A-League women's head coaches, and we've obviously seen the benefit of that straight away with Mark Milligan, our new A-League men's head coach, having a really strong impact with our Australia Cup campaign, and we're very fortunate to 2025 winners of that this year.
Yeah, 3-1. Great result.
Great result. So obviously it took longer than we'd like. Heidelberg had a great campaign and, 17 years in the making to win a trophy again. It was, I think, there's some images out there of our fans that travelled down to Melbourne that day and the emotion that they went through. Some of those may not have even been born when we won in 2008, but I was there that day, and it was one of those moments that I could enjoy and step away almost like a fan as well, and really soak up the celebration. So certainly a massive time to be on board at the Newcastle Jets. We have a lot of growth strategies, a lot of KPIs that are aggressive for the next couple of years, and we really want to make sure that the number one, core element of that is that the community is on board with what we're doing, and we're seeing that with our stakeholder network growing as corporate partners grow, and obviously we have an ambitious target with our memberships as well. So definitely an exciting time in the Hunter.
It is. So Newcastle is very unique in the sense that the clubs that you have here, whether it's A-League like yourselves, Newcastle Jets, or even Newcastle Knights Rugby League, for example, the locals really like to own and get behind these clubs, and they're very community focused. So where does that DNA come from, do you think?
Yeah, look, it's a great question, because it's sometimes, even as a Novocastrian, it's hard to explain, but we kind of do have almost that little bit of a chip on the shoulder type mentality. I remember growing up and going through the junior ranks, and as you start to progress and you're identified in maybe an elite pathway, and you start getting recommendations on what's best for your journey, the constant message was, probably now he needs to go to Sydney, or I'm sure young female and male players now are told, probably go to the metro areas where there's more resources and things like that. So it's no different when you look at, I guess, Newcastle in general. A lot of, young people go to university and then they seek work in some of the major big cities around the country. Whereas that narrative is shifted, I think, a little bit now. There's a lot more opportunity in Newcastle. It's very much a growing CBD outside the major capitals at the moment, and I think that's reflective in our sporting teams, the Knights and the Jets. We've always had that chip on our shoulder that we want to get one over the big brothers, so to speak, around the country. So I think when you look at Newcastle, even from our foundation as a settlement area, it's been a steel yard, really. We try and play on that and that narrative as well, that Newcastle is founded on hard work, and the Hunter region with wineries right through to, obviously, BHP was a huge operator here for a long time. So there's that real working class mentality that's ingrained in the people. So when you look at our sporting clubs, and the Jets is definitely no different, is that sometimes our fans and our supporters and our community are more aligned to the type of style we play and the performance and what the output is over the result, which is strange because everyone wants to be associated with a winner, and winning, of course, helps in many areas. But I mean, you look at historically, the Newcastle Knights has been very much a strong sporting element in the community for a long time. They've had up and down results, but even when the results don't go their way, like even in the past NRL season, they still have nearly sell-out stadium. And I think it's because they've stuck true to their DNA of what the team represents. And what it represents is that hardworking, that really labour-focused community that just want to see a team have a crack and be tough. And when you look at that style, that needs to be, I guess, a core element of the style of football that we want to play at the Jets. And what we're seeing now is that we have that hard-nosed element in the way the coaches want to go about the way they're playing. And we're seeing locals come through into our first team, and they understand that because it's almost ingrained in them from when they're kids, that they're representing something a bit bigger. And the Newcastle people we're seeing now are associating with that. And of course, the recent success of Oz Cup helps. So we hope that growth in association from the community aligning with our team only continues to grow.
And what an incredible story that is too, where you're building this foundation now where local kids, they're not going to have to think about having to go to Sydney, having to go to Melbourne anymore, because they're going to have those resources and the talents here in their hometown. Are you also seeing a resurgence, or maybe not a resurgence, but a surgence in popularity of football in Australia?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think, you just need to look, and I think Newcastle's a good region that is indicative of the growth of football. I mean, the numbers seem to grow every year across the nation. We have over 2 million participants that play the game. It's by far and away the furthest participated, grassroots sport in the community by a mile compared to any other sport. And Newcastle and the Hunter region is no different. I mean, we're sitting here right now in our Jets head office that we are fortunate enough to be so close here, almost wall to wall with Northern New South Wales Football, which handle all the junior participation and registrations in the Northern New South Wales region. So from pretty much Lake Macquarie, in the northern end of Central Coast, right up to the Queensland border and out west, that's our catchment zone within our sort of Hunter region. And the Jets is the number one, I guess, and the only elite pathway team in that area. And that area alone is out competing, I guess, some of the capital cities and, areas like Football South Australia that, can have a huge catchment area, not just in Adelaide, but across the South Australian states. So the numbers in Newcastle and up the coast are just growing year on year. In particular, there's a massive shift to the women's participation rate. So young girls are identifying with, I think, the success of the Matildas over the last couple of years, and we're seeing that in the growth in our region. The popularity of those grassroots participants coming to attend our women's A-League matches and watching our Jets team has risen. So we're in the top half of the performers across the A-League that have consistent attendance at our women's games. So I think the area of Newcastle and the upper Hunter, right up to the Queensland border, is a good indicator of how football is strong. It is continuing to grow. And really, when you look at the growth of Australia in general, and when you have a multicultural nation with new arrivals, and as urban sprawl happens, a lot of new arrivals identify with the game because they're coming from parts of the world where it's the number one sport. So that is an opportunity for us, as a code, to also connect and make people feel part of a community by the time they arrive in our country. So that's the beauty that football, I guess, and the advantage football has, is that we are able to connect with people from multiple backgrounds and a diverse population, and that is very indicative of Australia in general. So that's our advantage as a game, which is, I think, why participation is high and why growth is still happening. But there's still obviously a lot of work to be done and to make people feel like they're connected and a part of something bigger. And we try and focus on that here at the Jets by doing a hell of a lot of community work and making sure our players, when they're onboarded to the club, understand how important that is at our club compared to many others.
Need a car but don't want the hassle of owning one? With East Coast Subscriptions, you get the car you want with rego, insurance, servicing and roadside assistance all included. No loans, no long contracts, just total flexibility. Drive your way at eastcoastsubscriptions.com.au. So it's obviously changed a lot since you started playing as a kid, and you've had a hell of a career. You're the most capped player here at the Jets. You played over 300 games in the A-League, but as a kid coming up, I guess it was a lot different than kids today. The access that kids have to global football, to Premier League, to Champions League, on apps like Stan and Optus Sport and those sorts of things, didn't really exist when you were a kid growing up. So how much of an effect do you think that will have coming forward and developing your pipeline of talent for the next 10, 20 years here at the Jets?
Yeah, like as you mentioned, it's such a different football landscape now. Like it feels like sometimes the world is so small when you look at the football bubble we operate in sometimes, because of the access that young people have to you're right, Stan and Paramount Plus obviously hosting our games in Channel 10, SBS covering the championship now, which is the new national second tier. So these are all things that you can have on your phone and on your device, and obviously stream online at in your home TV. And I remember growing up that when I first started watching and becoming a lover of football, the best time was going live to the game. So I'd go to Breakers Stadium when in the old Newcastle United, Newcastle Breakers Day at Birmingham Gardens here in Newcastle. And that's what I look forward to, because that was where I got my biggest taste of watching football rather than sitting at home in front of the TV. Mind you, we used to have the World Game, which was on SBS on a Sunday afternoon, and a Monday night Premier League highlight show, which was excellent, where my love for Leeds United started. So obviously that was purely, being my age, watching the Premier League. We had some Australians there. So there was Jacob Burns, Harry Kewell, Marco Duca, that were based at Leeds United. So it was a draw card straight away. And I remember I was a passionate kid as well. I used to write letters to, Leeds United, and, I just was fully obsessed, and I couldn't wait for the Sunday afternoon and the Monday night show. And then of course, watching my team and the Newcastle Breakers and Newcastle United play on the weekend in the old NSL. So I feel like when you look at the access now that young players have, not just to watch football games, but to actually have access to football content. So there's so much work being done in the digital space from some of the big hitters in the world that, kids have access to training drills. They have access to apps and resources that teach you to train like a pro. And, there's so many tools out there in academies and things like that, and tours. There's global tours that Man City and Barcelona run that parents can invest to go in. But I still think it comes down to, because the reality is of professional football is that, I've said this to many people, is that I wouldn't change a thing about my journey. As some of the stats you mentioned, for me are so humbling, and I'm grateful for the journey I had. Wouldn't change a thing, but really it's 90 to 95% of resilience and persistence. And you do that hard graft of the setbacks and the things that go wrong and the mistakes that happen, to achieve that 5% of success, maybe across a 20-year period. So it's a strange sort of, it's a strange thing to think about, that, why would you almost punish yourself for 90% of the time for only that small bit of glory? But you really got to be so absorbed and love the game so much to get through the hard times. And that's the reality of every professional footballer. So whilst kids these days have all those resources and they can have access to, the best training modules and the best content online, I still think the journey and the pipeline that you create to produce the best players has to come from one thing and one thing alone, and that's a pure love and admiration for the game. And then how you make them fall in love with the game, I believe, is that you still need them to come and watch your team. So if we want to look at our Jets pipeline, we want our young players connected and know our first team. We want them to interact with them. We want them to almost see that there is a pathway and have locals in our first grade team that our pipeline go, yeah, it's achievable. So when those hard times happen, and it happens in the junior space through the academy, you might get dropped 1 year and spend 3 years out of the academy and come back in. You want them to still see that it's a realistic goal. And for far too long, I feel like the A-League in particular went away, and there was this idea of marquee players and internationals, and we'd spend a lot of money on that to make sure that we'd have success. Whereas really the most sustainable model going forward, in my opinion, is to utilize the academies that we now have as in the A-League spaces to filter into our A-League men and A-League women's team. And then you hope they progress and they shine in the A-League and go on to bigger and better things. National team, the biggest leagues in Europe. And really, I guess coming back to it is that, you need to make sure that they love the game. The environment's somewhere they want to be, because it's a tough journey. But we can make that easier by creating a great culture with the right people. And I feel like that's a lot of work's being done in that space, especially at our club.
Yeah, I mean, that culture's obviously evident here because you spent so long at this club. As you mentioned, yeah, it's really important for you to be able to see that pathway and have that mentorship as well. I think there are so many options now, and there's probably arguably too much pressure on young kids now because of these options. So, like you said, there's Barcelona academies, there's a million things you can do and invest in. How do you sort of combat that, or how do you address that in terms of resilience? Because these kids do put a lot of pressure on themselves. Their parents have invested financially into a lot of these things. And sometimes the skill levels can accelerate at a faster pace than the mental side of things and the resilience side of things. So how do you sort of balance that?
I think, I can only sort of speak on behalf of my own journey on how I feel it worked out. And for me, the resilience and the persistence to continually do what I do and rock up every day comes from my identity. I was always someone that was very cautious around identifying as a footballer. I didn't want to do that. I thought it was a huge part of what I did, but not who I was. So I think that all stems back to when I was 18 years old and I was playing in my first year, and sure enough, great first year, 2007, 2008, we won the league. So first year of professional football, had some really key senior players in the Jets at the time, some players that had been in the Socceroos, and I looked up to these guys. I went to train every day. I was in awe. I was like, yeah, I felt like I belonged, which was great. It was a good culture. But I still had these guys as like heroes. Some of them were at the end of their career. So in the next 2-year period, I saw them retire, and I saw that they really fell off the perch. Like they lost a real sense of purpose around what they were doing. They wouldn't answer the phone. You'd reach out. Some of these guys I connected with every day, they were absent, and you're like, yeah, they're struggling. So from a really young age, I thought, okay, there's got to be a succession plan. Football can end tomorrow. It's just one bad injury away. And even if I'm fortunate enough to have a 20-year career, I sort of had that idea straight away that you've got to be active. You've got to do something, because it won't last forever. You can't play into normal retirement years. It was 65 or whatever it is. So I thought, what am I going to do for that period from 35 onwards, if I'm lucky enough to get there? So education became a huge thing. So I was like, I need to make sure I'm prepared for what I think about what I want to do, and make sure that if I'm having a bad day with football, I might have got a good result in a uni exam or something like that. So that mental state I was at, I felt worthy. So if I had a bad game and scored an own goal and we lost the game, which happened, it's still one of these games. I remember Wellington away, lost the game, scored an own goal. I felt like the world was caving in on me the whole trip home from Wellington. I wanted it to be in Sydney or in Newcastle so I could just go to bed. It's not the case. You've got to travel across from Wellington back home. It feels like it lasts for 3 days, that guilt of letting the team down. But funnily enough, I remember that week was a huge assessment was due at uni in my degree. And when I completed it, I felt great. So for me, my whole life wasn't surrounded by football. And I felt like I had a really strong influence from parents and my wife that also pulled me out of that football bubble, because it's dangerous. And you see with a lot of athletes, they really focus a lot of their attention. And I get it. You want to capitalize on your status as a professional athlete while you're in it. And there's a lot of extracurricular activities that go into it. There's sponsorships and endorsements and things like that. You have a lot of people that want a piece of you when you're an athlete. But I think if you can remove yourself on a daily basis and focus on, identifying as somebody else. And that's just, I think it's important for young players to realize that you've got to love football and it's what you do, but it's not who you are. There's a lot more to individuals than that moment in time when they're a professional athlete. And then that for me creates resilience, because you realize that it's not the be all and end all when you're on top of the world as a footballer, and it's not the be all and end all when you're at the bottom of the chain, you've had a bad game. And for me, having those different facets to your life builds resistance, and it also makes you appreciate, because it's not easy to sit up at night juggling university and sleep and training and nutrition as an athlete. But what it does do is it creates process in your life that you realize, well, what do I really enjoy doing? I got to get through this because I know it's good for me, but geez, I can't wait to wake up and see my mates and go to train in the morning. And that for me, it made me appreciate football. So things, when they were bad, I still loved being there. And that led me to be resilient and persist, because at any given point, my parents used to say to me, well, if you've had a bad day, just throw it in, we don't care. And I was like, well, no, I want to go back. It's a bad day, but I'll go back. I'm just venting. So I didn't have a push from mum and dad. And I think sometimes parents can push and create extra pressure. I didn't have that. I feel like it worked so well, because then the motivation came from me. I was the one that really wanted it, because mum and dad can't hold your hand on the field when you get to that professional level. So for me, definitely the key point is making sure that young players, I think it's important they do finish school. And at our football club, we'll support that wholeheartedly. We have pathways programs with our partnership with the university that we make sure that we're building the people, and then we'll see the best version of the player. And that's important to be resilient as a young person.
So that really speaks to your transition out of being a player and into a role within the club outside of just being on the field. And I believe that was in player welfare.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And is that kind of the foundation of what you brought into that role?
Yeah, and I mean, I was like I said, I was very grateful to be supported by the football club in that transition moment. So I went pretty much from retiring at the last game of the A-League season in say early May, to starting my role in June. So I had a bit of downtime to have a trip away with the family, went straight into work. So I didn't have time to sort of dwell on too many things, which was great for me. And then having that welfare aspect to what I did. So I was working in a commercial space with some of our partners to help, connect, I guess, my degree to where I could bring value to the football club. But probably what was the most enjoyable side of the first year out of playing the game was that welfare piece that I had, which was just a basic understanding of what to look for and any signs where people are struggling. And I mean, that comes almost naturally if you're an empathetic person and you are part of a team and you feel like individuals in the space really well. You have a basic understanding of people's welfare and what support they might need, or look at the signs as to maybe I'm not the obviously I'm the expert in mental health training, but I understand the signs and I can refer people on. And really that was my role for that first 6 to 12 months out of the game. And what it did was it connected me still to the change room, which was great. So it was great for me. But also I felt like I had a lot of purpose and a lot of value to add to that change room from a mentor point of view. And also work with the players that maybe weren't playing week in, week out, and you saw those signs of how they would struggle, and just connect and be an eyes and ears of someone that hopefully they respected, and I felt respected by the group, that they would open up and share things that maybe they don't want to share with their teammates or the coach. And then obviously I would always be respectful and ask if it was big enough. Are you okay? I share this with the staff. They should be aware, and we can look after you and make sure you get support you need. And that happened. That for me, that just sort of goes back to, I guess, how I was as a player and how I am as a person. I feel like I've always been social. I've always been wanting to connect and build good relationships with people. So that role in particular, that side of my role for the last sort of year was one that I really enjoyed, because I felt like I could give back to the young players that come into the environment and they struggle. And I'm not in a position where I'm also focusing on myself to perform. I could see it from an external lens and go, great, I can see that they're struggling. And it made me feel so, I guess, valuable that I could positively impact some players and help drive a culture where they felt safe and they felt supported. And 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 I would always encourage that football is, while you're here, you've got to be here, but when you walk away from here, you need to have a good network, whether that's study, whether that's family, whether that's the social environment you're in. You need to position yourselves as athletes of people that bring you up, make you feel good. And just those little comments and those little, I guess, referrals to different networks that we have and around the community, I think made the difference, with certainly some individuals last year. But yeah, and then obviously I've moved out of that space now into definitely more the commercial lens now, and it's a lot more engagement with our partners. And in saying that, the principle is still the same for me. I feel like that I'll help the club grow if I come back to being an empathetic person and I can understand stakeholder point of views and really just build that relationship. And that's what our community wants. Newcastle people, I think in general in our community, just want to feel connected and want to know that you're a good person, and I'll support you because you're a good person. And I feel like that's, we are very much a community and a people-centric organisation at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. So, in your role as head of commercial here, again, it's quite unique, probably compared to some of the other clubs. There are bigger clubs.
Yep.
But I don't think there are any clubs that are as connected with their stakeholders as this one. So East Coast Car Rentals is lucky enough to be even just a minor supporter here at the Jets. But, I know how hard you work in terms of getting communications out to us and all of your other partners, and making sure that everyone is aware of what each other's business does. And, you're constantly working that network to the benefit of those stakeholders. So tell us a little bit about that and what your goals are there for your partners and stakeholders.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I guess when we looked at our commercial portfolio, when I first came into this role, there was clearly a market gap there where, when you talk to enough of your partners in the community, you realize that there's a gap here where the season runs from October through to May. So we're like, we need a product or we need a service and provide connection for people that runs more 12-month, or year round. So we developed like a Jetson Business Network, which is like our sporting business chamber, so to speak, where basically, we see our partnerships as a partnership with purpose. So for East Coast Car Rentals, I know that that you guys have a similar philosophy that, your real point of difference is the experience, the customer experience and the customer journey, and that service that you provide, which really separates you from the market. And at the Jets, we're no different with products like Jetson Business. Like, we want to make sure that our partners see a point of difference, and it's not just a flashy logo on a shirt or on the website and supporting our Jetson Business movement. No, we want to drive value back to the business. So really, I think we've tried really hard to communicate the best we can about, East Coast is a good example, about in our network of partners, and we've grown from 34 to now just over 100 partners. So that creates a platform for us to utilize and leverage, that platform to the benefit of a company like East Coast. So we definitely try and communicate that amongst that core network of partners we have, if you're looking to do business in the Hunter, come to Jetson Business members first. So, East Coast is the exclusive rental car company in that network. So the moment anyone travels around the country, we know that the clear messaging is that, it drives value back to East Coast Car Rentals in your support of our football club, but also, you guys, like many others, you also look after our members too, as part of an integrated, connected community. And really, that's where we've tried to change the way we operate as a commercial team at the moment, and as a commercial club. It's about, like I mentioned, partnerships with purpose. So how can we make sure that your investment and support of our football club is returned by leveraging our platform to connect you to a wider audience? And for us, I guess having that opportunity is first and foremost the most important part. So we really want to make sure our service and our experience for our partners is like no other, and they feel like by supporting the Jets as a club, you're connected straight away through our gateway into our community. And we want to make sure that, when our partners think of rental, they think East Coast first.
Yeah, and we definitely see it. Like I said, we see all the hard work that you personally do in that. What we love too is that going back to what we were talking about previously around supporting players throughout their careers, is that you're also using that network of partners that you've built throughout the community to the benefit of them. So if they need things, whether it's car rental, car subscription, if they need wheels to get somewhere, you've got a partner to help them. It could be banking, it could be any number of local products and services they have access to.
That's right. I mean, I think we're fortunate again to have such a diverse portfolio of businesses in that 100 wide network of partners. So yeah, to your point, most people as well feel connected to come on board, and they want to get to know the players, and they want that access to experience that you can't get if you're a regular fan or a member in the grandstand. So we create bespoke arrangement and opportunity for our partners to connect with our team, and our team is very much briefed on how important it is to be, in particular, connected to our partner network. So when requests come up and people want to utilize our players in some of their campaigns, we're always saying yes. This is part of what we do as a club. But in return to the players, of course, there's opportunity for them to get support, because the journey is hard, as we discussed, as an athlete. So yeah, perfect example is, we have international players come in. We've only got a handful at the club at the moment, which creates its challenges for support when they arrive. Where do they stay? How do they get around? And straight away we say, okay, well, one example is said to a player coming from Ireland that came in. We said to him, connect with the East Coast. They might be able to look after you, with a subscription rate or some of the great products and services you offer to get you, around the community and what you got to do for promotional events, training each day. And sure enough, that was one example where it worked out. And then players, might want to spend longer than they thought. They just re-signed a long-term deal in the Hunter, and someone might want to buy a house here now. So great, one of our major partners, Greater Bank, they have an exclusive rate that they offer to players and our staff, and also to our partner network. So really, I think the challenge for me in my role is making sure that players, staff, and our other partners are aware of what the other partners are doing and the offers that they have, because really there's a lot of value that can be provided back within this whole Jets network and ecosystem. So that's the challenge we have, and making sure that every 100 partner, gets their time in the sun, and also people understand who they are and what they do. So we have a good event coming up soon. I know East Coast has a presence there, which is where in our Jets and Business Network, it's the first time for this calendar season where the business gets to present and do an elevator pitch for, this is who we are, and this is what we stand for, and here's an offer for you. And that gets relayed to the playing squad as well. So they're aware of, okay, well, if my family's coming in from out of town from up Brisbane way, and they're coming to Newcastle, great, I know that I can go to East Coast and they'll have a car to get around and look around the Hunter and go have a wine in the Hunter Valley, and create a better experience for people coming into the area. So I guess it's all about leveraging each partner and what they bring to the table and making them feel important, especially in Jets and Business. That's an environment where we have everyone that's seen as equal investment in that. So our major partners right through to, player sponsors and Jets and Business members that invest, the amount is irrelevant. The reality is that that's a great pathway to say major partners and big industry and small industry can connect and still offer value to one another. And that's been a huge success so far.
So what can we expect this season?
Well, what we can expect, I think, is, I'll start off the field first. So what you can expect is, I guess, connection and visibility. So the Jets, will be extremely active in the community with school visits, community representation at holiday camps, plenty of fun activation in the grandstand around match day, trying to make the experience be the preferred entertainment option for the weekend rather than go to the movies. We want people to come to our games on Saturdays and Sundays. So a lot of energy and focus being into creating entertainment for people and products and services that people enjoy. And then on the pitch, I think, when you look at the already recent success that Mark and the A-League men's team have had, we're expecting to be there at the crunch time, in late May, which is obviously semis and grand finals. The expectation now has been set, which is great. When you have a success, expectation rises. So for us, on the field, we're thinking that the men's team is positioned to have a real crack at silverware. Excitingly for us as well, they haven't started yet, but they do begin their campaign on Sundays, the A-League women's space. It was only 2 years ago they were in a prelim final, so they're a game away from the grand final here at Maitland Sports Ground. And then last year was a blip on the radar, and they've built again with a new head coach, new philosophy of how they want to play. Pre-season games at the moment look beyond exciting, but you never get too swept up in pre-season and how it turns out. But I think it's the first time in a long time we've looked at it and said, both academy girls and boys spaces are producing players that are getting first team minutes. So that's great on pitch. Men's team's already had silverware. We're thinking they'll have a crack at the championship. Women's team is looking beyond exciting, where they're seen to have fixed, the issues that were there last year. And we'll have a real crack, I suppose, at finals football and silverware there. So I guess for our fans to see local players coming through our academy system, playing men's and women's professional football action, and being successful on field, you compound that with the hard work of the admin staff that is driving entertainment at game days, community visibility and connection for our partners. I feel like the club's definitely in a position to become a force to be reckoned to across the league.
Well, we're definitely looking forward to seeing it. You've got a big year ahead, and just want to thank you for your time and jumping on the podcast with us.
No, of course. Obviously, I thank East Coast Car Rentals for all their support, and I can't wait to have my next adventure as well. That'll go from there to here and here to there, and hopefully we're on that ride together as a partner network and a club for success for us all.
All right, thanks, Chase.
Thanks, Ben.
Mate.
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 Enjoy Mates Rates every day with East Coast Car Rentals. Simply book direct and enjoy your savings. eastcoastcarrentals.com.au